Animation. Now that we have everything approved and ready to go, we are able to move into the animation phase of the project. I'm not going to animate all of the scenes of the project, as they will form part of the assignment for this week. It will probably also make this lesson an hour long if I actually animated everything. But I will go over important parts of the process and some new options that will help you understand how this project can be animated. For the animation, I'll start by importing my files that I have already divided into layers. I'll select Composition, Retain Layer Sizes. This way I can import all my footage with one single click. Next, I'll start renaming and adding everything to their respective folders. Now that I have all my scenes imported into my After Effects file, I can start working on the animation. We'll start by looking at the logo. I'm sure that you've seen the Olympic logo before and have noticed that the rings actually intersect each other. In our case, we don't have that intersection. We just have the circles separated, so we'll need to incorporate that intersection through animation. I'll start by selecting all my shapes and converting them into vector shape layers. Next, I'm going to add a trim path animation. To do this, I'll go into Animation, Recent Animation Presets, and select Trim Paths. This is an animation preset that I made myself. To make your own preset, you just need to go into your layers and select the animation keyframes that you want to use as a preset. Next, you'll go into Animation and save the keyframes as an animation preset. It's going to ask you for a name, which you can choose. Next time you want to use your preset, you'll find it under the Recent Animation Presets. Now that I have all my shapes animated with trim paths, I can think of how to intersect them. To make this easier, I'm going to change the shape to a color so it's easier to identify them. If you look at our reference, the blue should intersect with the yellow one, so I'll start here. I'll duplicate the blue ring and put it on top of the yellow one, and then I'll go into my Shape tool and make sure that it is on Create Masks. Otherwise, it's going to create another shape inside the shape layer. All I need to do now is just select this intersecting part. Now we have the animation, and the mask is just covering the yellow ring to create that intersection. Let's check our reference. You can see that we have the rings in correct positions and they are intersecting each other in the right way. When we play the animation, we can see that they are animating correctly. The next thing I would do is offset the sequence timings so that they don't animate in at the same time. But I'll work on that off camera, and instead, I'll show you how to add the white stroke and drop shadow effect that we have in our Illustrator file. Let's pre-comp all these rings. I'm also going to show you another way you can add certain values or effects to layers. If you right-click, you'll see that we have layer styles. Layer styles allow you to add drop shadows, inner shadows, and many other effects you might know from Photoshop. It's important to understand that it's not going to be added as an effect. It's going to be added as a property to the layer. This means that if I add a stroke, the stroke is going to be added to all of my layers, and it's going to show as the paths animate in because we've already created the animation. That's why we need to pre-compose this. Now all I need to do is open my stroke and change the color. Let's add the drop shadow effect. We need to consider that because we added this as a layer style, we will also need to add the drop shadow as a layer style too. If we try to add the drop shadow effect from our effects panel, you'll see that it gets added in the wrong position. This happens because there's a hierarchy that After Effects follows and uses to apply styles and effects. So normally, the drop shadow and all the effects you have here will be applied before any of the layer styles. So keep that in mind, because if you add any type of effect and you are using layer styles, the order of rendering for the software is the effects first, and then the layer styles. So in this case, I'm going to erase the drop shadow, and I'll right-click Layer Styles, and I'll add the drop shadow here. Open the parameters and select the right color for the shadow. In this case, we're using blue with this hex code. In this module, you'll have the color palette and all the other files you will need available as a downloadable resource. Now that we have our stroke and drop shadow set up, we can easily copy all the layer styles and paste them onto other layers that might need them. That's going to be the easiest way of doing it. Now we have animated our logo and have used the same style that we established in our Illustrator file. Next, I'll work with the transition that I'll be using to move from one scene to the other, with the exception of Scene 1, where I'll use a different transition. I'll start by importing the Illustrator file that I have called TextBox. Again, I'll select Composition and retain Layer Size. Let's change the background color of the composition. As you can see, I have 3 layers. The first one is for the color, the second one is for the white stroke, and the final one has the same color as the background of the other scenes. So if we have something below this, it will be able to cover it. Next, we'll transform everything into a shape vector layer. The basic idea for this transition is to have this shape come from a circle, and that circle should be large enough to cover the entire screen and then shrink down to this position while covering everything that is behind it. In order to create this, we're going to have to animate it backwards. We'll start with this shape and end up with the complete circle. As I animate it, you'll see why I do this and why it's the simplest way to do it. Let's start with this one. Now, as you can see, the circle is animating the correct way so that it can transform into the text box. Next, I'll add the other layers and do the same thing. It's really easy when you use the Pick Whip tool, but we cannot use this Pick Whip since this Pick Whip will only work with transformation parameters like scale, position, and the other transformation parameters. What we're going to have to do is unfold all the path properties. I'll give myself some room here so you can see what's going on. Here you can see that all properties have their own pick whip. So you can easily pick whip one property to another. Now all the paths will have the same values as this one, so you only need to animate it once. The thing is, you should always pick whip properties that have similar values, otherwise you can get errors. In this case, it's really easy because we're just parenting paths with paths. Now that we have this, the transition should be inverted, right? So I should have this circle become transparent and then become a solid color in order to cover the last scene. And I should have the background come in so that it covers the entire scene at the back. What we'll do is we'll take a background from any of our other scenes, and I'll put it here and use it as an alpha inverted matte. This way we have a cutout in our shape, right? Let's test this using Scene 2. And if I had Scene 2 at the back, and I have my transition, you'll see it will come in and stretch. We can adjust the transparency as it closes into a circle. To animate the transparency, you need to set a keyframe at 0 and another one at 100. So now when this changes and starts stretching out, the transparency will cover the other image. Now what we can do is find the color value for this and add it as an essential graphics property. This way we can control the color of the shape and use this transition for other different animations. Let's also create a marker. I'm going to double-click on it and make it a protected region for the responsive design and use it as an intro. Now we've just easily created the transition effect for all of the scenes. For the next part, I'll jump directly into scene 3 and show you how I would animate it. I'll start by turning off my background layer and import the transition we've just created so that it animates into this position that we have. Next, I'll unfold my transition, select my essential properties, and select the color of the line. Now I can hide my text boxes, and as you can see, we have a perfect transition from one scene to another. If the text happens to be on the lower part of the scene, I can easily animate the position to go up and then move to the correct position. We don't have any transparency here, so what I can do is turn on the background layer and move it to this exact point so that it only shows with the transparency animation. Next, we have this metal that we can animate in a swinging motion. I've already imported my file from Illustrator, and we need to animate this swinging motion that makes the metal appear to go back and forth. First, we'll click and convert this layer to shapes from vector layers. Let's also add the Illustrator file here as a single layer at the back. This will serve as a reference image for when I animate the coin moving back and forth. So I'll hide it for now, and I'll select all my layers and type Path. With the Path parameter selected, I'll add a keyframe at the 1 second position. Now I'll press U to only display the paths, and I'll move to the 0 second mark. I'll turn on the reference layer to display the next position that we need to animate the paths of the coin to. It'll also give it a lower opacity, so it's easier to see what I'm trying to do. I'll change the background of my composition to white, so it's also easier to see what I'm doing, and now I can animate it moving back and forth. Now, as you can see, I have animated this movement for my metal. It's swinging from the front view to a different angle. Next, I'll have to do the same thing for the back position. With the last position complete, I now have an animation of my metal swinging forwards and backwards. Next, we can add the final detail, the shine. I left it as the last thing to add because it's going to be using track mats from the metal in order to create the shine movement. The center layer is one part that is going to be covering the shine, so I'll duplicate this layer Change the color to black and use it as an alpha matte. Next, we can lower the opacity to 50%, and as you can see, the shine is cropped to the boundaries of the center layer. We'll also need to animate the shine path to follow the same trajectory as the metal. I'll duplicate my shine outline, and then I'll select the body outlines and duplicate this layer. I'll move the layer to the top and change the color to black. I'll turn off the visibility so it's being used as an alpha track matte. And that's how we get our swinging metal. I can also just copy my central keyframes so that it swings back to the middle. Now we have our swinging animation, and it stops swinging at the middle position. Now I'll import it into scene 3. And my idea is that it animates in from above and swings in from behind the text here. So what I'm going to do is add a black solid, and I'll use the alpha inverted matte to mask the composition. Therefore, the black layer needs to be covering what it's going to show. I can just change the anchor point for this. I'll move it right here, and I'll animate the scale and the position. And voila! I can tweak the animation so that it doesn't stop right here in the middle and has a bit more motion to it. But I'll do that off screen. You should be able to grasp the basics of how it will be animated. Let's continue with the animation of the other scenes. For this scene, I'll use the trim paths to animate each shape, and then use a simple transformation animation to bring them into the right place. Now that my animation is ready, I'll go back into scene 3, and as you can see, my animation is working perfectly. The only thing that's missing is animation on the text layer. The text was imported as a vector layer, so we're not able to use any of the After Effects animation text presets to animate it. So what we're going to do is go back to Illustrator, double-click on the text, select and copy it, go back into After Effects, click on the text tool and paste it. It will paste with the same font, colors, and presets. Let's quickly create a simple animation for this text using some of the text parameters. And now we're going to test our animation to see how it looks. The point of this part of the course was to show you how I would animate different elements in After Effects. Now that you've seen some examples of it, your next assignment will be to animate the 2 remaining scenes. Don't forget to add the background elements and animate them as you wish. In this module, you'll be able to download all the files you'll need to animate these 2 scenes. As an added bonus for the assignment, try to animate the scenes that I animated in this lesson, I'm going to be sharing this After Effects file, but the idea is for you to try and do this based on what you've learned in this lesson. As you might have noticed, we're missing 2 scenes from our storyboard, Scene 5 and 6. Those will form part of another assignment, and the idea is for you to create them from scratch. You'll need to create the images based on the text, finish the storyboard, and animate those last 2 scenes. So start thinking about how you're going to do those and incorporate the same design style that we've been using so far. Along with all files, I'll also upload an MP4 video with my animation, which will include scenes 1 to 4 with all the transitions and background elements. I would suggest you don't watch this animation until you've finished your assignment. However, feel free to watch it if you're feeling like you don't know how to animate certain things and you need inspiration. Something to note is that in Scene 4, there's a metal in the middle and it should be spinning when it comes into frame. I've already created an Illustrator file for that called Coin Spin. You can use these layers as a reference and to animate the coin spinning into the scene. Good luck, and have fun working on your assignment!